Hey, this is WhyBeAre with BeamNG.drive, and today we're going to do something that's been on my mind for a long time. I want to figure out what is the slowest car in the game. So to do that, we're going to do a bunch of drag races on the drag strip on West Coast USA. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through each vehicle and pick what I think would be the slowest version of it. Then we're going to have a big fat list of every car so we can figure out which ones are the slowest. We'll also have a couple of separate vehicles in there for the modified vehicles that are actually slower than the production versions, which is most common on like the off-road versions. And we're going to try to go through the vehicles from what I would expect to be fastest to slowest. So I would think the Bolide would be the fastest. Even though it's old, it's still a supercar. So the lowest end version should be decently fast still. And I need to keep the racing as simple as possible so it's consistent from every vehicle. So we're going to do it very, very simply. We're going to keep it in automatic shifting mode and we're just going to floor it. And however it launches, it launches. We're not going to do extra special launches for cars that could benefit from it. It just is part of the car if it can't launch good on its own. So with the Bolide, we get a time of 14.971, which will hopefully be the fastest time you see. So now we're going to go ahead and change up the vehicle and do the test once more. So the next slowest vehicle would probably be something like the ETK series. Now we have a manual and automatic version on this one. And since it's a newer vehicle, it probably has a good automatic transmission. So we're going to pick the manual one as the one that's most likely to be slower. But when we get to the older vehicles, the automatic will probably be slower. At least that's assuming the game is realistic, because in real life, automatic transmissions have got so much better that just a regular old automatic like a ZF 8-speed, those are better than a manual transmission. And we have a time of 14.838, which is actually faster than the Bolide. So already I was wrong, but the times are very, very close. That's about a 1/10 of a second between the two vehicles, so it's not like it's a huge issue that I was wrong in this situation. The only thing that matters is that we're in the general vicinity of the vehicles when we switch between them. So next up, how about we do the other ETK, which is the 800 series. And on this one, we have a lot of options actually, because we have the 854T, which is the gasoline 4-cylinder. Then we have the TC, which is the comfort version, which would probably be slower than that one. But then we have the 854TD. This is the diesel version. I'm assuming the diesel is going to be slower than the gasoline one. And once again, it's a newer vehicle, so we're going to be using the manual version to go as slow as we possibly can. Also, if you pay attention to the boost here, it goes up and then it starts to drop a little bit. So I'm making sure the way I do it is I hit A and then I accelerate immediately afterwards. So maybe it'll be a little bit outside of maximum boost, but it should be pretty close to maximum boost, so it'll still be very consistent from vehicle to vehicle. And we get a time of 15.556. Quite a bit slower than all of the other times, but I can't think of a vehicle that would be much faster. Now, before we move on to the next vehicle, though, there's another one of the ETK 800s I want to take a look at. That's the drift version. And you might be thinking, the drift version, how could that be slow? It's a drift car. But here's the thing. If you look at the stats on it, it's using the exact same engine as the 854TD, except somehow it has less torque and less horsepower. I don't exactly understand why that would be the case, but I'm assuming this one could be even slower than the production version. So we're going to try it out. All right, there's one thing I got to admit about the drift version. It has the better color. It had a better launch, it seemed like. It really popped off the line. But is that going to be enough? I don't know. It feels pretty close right here. Maybe a little bit slower. The only thing that'll tell us is the time, which says it was slower. 15.930. It's almost a half second slower than the regular version. Drifters apparently don't know how to make a car right. All right, next up, how about we go with the SBR4, which you would think would actually be a pretty fast option, except if you look at the stats on the base version, they're kind of pitiful. It only has 175 horsepower for a car that looks that fast and sporty. And again, we have two transmission options, manual or dual clutch. Dual clutches are always fast, so we're going to choose the manual option for this. And I bet you this thing is going to look way slower off of the line than the ETK we were just driving. Yeah. That thing barely had a squeal as it launched. Oh, the wing went up. That's actually probably going to make the quarter-mile time worse because it increases the drag, I think. Either way, it doesn't matter because we got a time of 15.5 1.59. That is just a smidgen slower than the production ETK we were driving just a second ago. And it's kind of nice, actually. If you forget what time is for what vehicle, if you hover over it on the bottom of the screen, it shows you what's what. And I only mention this because I've never actually shown that in a video before, but it's there and it's very convenient for something like this where you're like, well, what car was I slower than? Oh, it's the ETK 800 854 TD manual. So next up, we're gonna go with, well, everything here looks pretty decently slow probably, but how about we go with the Grand Marshal? Because with the Grand Marshal, even the slowest version gets a V8 engine. Now we have the Fleet and the V8. We're gonna go with the Fleet version because it's heavier than the V8 because the V8 gets alloy wheels, where I guess the Fleet just has boring steel wheels. You also might think maybe the Lux would be heavier because it has all this extra chrome on it, but if you look at the weight, it's less than the Fleet. As for the police ones with all their extra police gadgets, they're heavier, but they have a bigger engine as well. So that's why the Fleet one wins. Although really now, is that something you want to win? Congratulations, you're the slowest version of the vehicle. That's basically getting a trophy that says last place. Good job. I guess you tried maybe? We don't really know. Nobody paid attention because you came in dead last. Just make it as insulting as possible, you know? And across the line with a time of 16.241. That is easily the slowest time yet, so that's the slowest vehicle yet. Next up, how about the 200BX? It is a sports car after all, so it should be decently fast. And again, we have a handful of versions. We got the base and the Type L. The Type L is lighter than the base because again, it has alloy wheels, so you're gonna want to stick with the base. And since it's an older car, probably the automatic is going to be slower than the manual. All right, so let's see how well it launches. You notice with the automatic transmission, it's sitting at like 2,000 RPM. If we were using the manual, it would have launched a lot harder than that and probably shifted a little bit faster. So the manual version, way better if you want to go fast. We don't want to go fast, so this is perfect. And across the line in 16.287. Was that faster or slower than the last one? It was slower, but not by much. Those cars are basically neck and neck. And I should mention real quickly, both the Grand Marshal and the 200BX have like their Derby version, but I think the Derby version would be faster because it ends up being lighter weight because they strip away a lot of the parts. Yeah, they also add a roll cage, but that'll make the vehicle stiffer, so even if it's the same weight, it'll also be stiffer, which should make it drive faster, which is why we're not going to try out any of the Derby versions. So next up, how about we do the Sunburst? It's a newer car, but then you have this version, which is a 1.8 liter engine with a CVT transmission. Actually, that makes more power than I thought. It makes 135 horsepower. I should also mention right now, I've been doing pretty good at guessing which ones are going to be slower than the rest. But that's going to end soon because at the top end, it's pretty easy. Then they kind of just become a blob of similar performing cars. Oh, whoa, okay. It is so weird driving a CVT car. For a second, I'm like, what is the transmission doing? Oh, right, CVT. Oh, man, they just are weird. And across the line with a time of 16.915. That is, in fact, the slowest time by quite a decent margin. Next up, we're going to go with the Ibishu Pessima. It's going to be the new one, not the old one. And for this one, it's a newer car once again. So we're going to pick the smallest engine with the automatic transmission, which is the 1.8 DXA. And don't worry about the turbo burger. That one is junk. It's the exact same as this vehicle, but it has a turbo burger paint job on it. Performance should be identical, unless you want to count the weight of the paint. But I don't think the game does that. I think no matter what paint job you have, it has the same weight to it. And even if it gave it a different weight, I'm not going to worry about testing it because the difference will be so minuscule, it's not worth it. It's officially slower than the previous car with a 17.615. Again, a pretty big jump from that vehicle to the last one. There's just this zone where only the Sunburst lives. Everything else is outside of that. All right, next up, how about we go with, the Vivas. This one actually might be faster than the Pessima, although it does have only a 3-cylinder engine. Actually, there are two options. I think we might need to test both. We have the Vivas 110, which is a 3-cylinder gas engine, and then we have the 110D, which is a 4-cylinder diesel, but it's also heavier. So I actually don't know which one of these would be slower. The only way to know is to test it out and figure it out. And by the way, we will also test the Tograk, but we're going to treat them as two separate vehicles because they're different enough where I think their results should be separate from each other, because I would love to see what the difference in speed is just between the WhyBeAre and the Tograk in this test. Although we'll only do one run with the Tograk, we're going to use whichever version of the WhyBeAre was slower, because that's the same thing with a gas or diesel engine option. So that's a time of 17.735. Now we go on to the diesel. And it's kind of nice because they have different colors. So if you forget which one you were, you're like, well, it was the gray one, so we got to use the blue one now. Now my gut always says diesel is going to be slower than gas. Not always the case, but usually it is for comparable vehicles. With this one, they actually have the exact same horsepower, but the diesel has a ton more torque. So maybe the extra torque is able to overcome the extra 100 pounds? We're going to find out in about 3 seconds. So we get a time of 17.835. That is very, very close to the gasoline, but just a smidgen slower. So now we're going to get the diesel version of the Tograk, which has the same engine, but about an extra 200 pounds on it. Although the more I think about it, the more I wonder, is it possible the diesel version of the Tograk is better than the gasoline version of the Tograk, but then the gasoline version of the WhyBeAre is better than the diesel version of the WhyBeAre? I don't know exactly how that could be the case, but maybe if the Tograk is slower through the air because it's less aerodynamic, the extra torque could be beneficial? We're going to test it just because I'm curious now. So the Tograk is slower than the WhyBeAre by about 1/100 of a second with the same engine configuration, and just to settle my curiosity here. Gasoline version of the Tograk. How do you compare? You know, I will say, based purely on engine sound, which is not really a good metric, the 4-cylinder diesel is awful. It's the most generic sounding engine ever. The 3-cylinder, it doesn't sound fast, but it at least sounds interesting. It has its own unique sound to it a little bit. So now, let's answer my question. Oh, that is interesting. Okay, look at this. This to me is really interesting. You guys probably yawn and don't even care, but this is really interesting to me. So, in the ratings, for the WhyBeAre, the gasoline is faster than the diesel. But then for the Tograk, the diesel is faster than the gasoline. That's really interesting. The vehicles are so similar, but just the extra height, maybe the extra weight as well, makes it where the extra torque is beneficial. That's cool. All right, next up, let's use the Ibishu Corvette. And on this one, there are actually a couple of different versions that we're going to need to test in addition to the production version. But for the production version, we're going to be using the 1.5 DX manual version. If there was an automatic option, I would have chosen it, but for this engine, we only have manual. It's the tiniest little squeak as you launch, just like, and then it's off to the races at these speeds. Not very fast speeds. It is, after all, the base version of an 80s economy car. It's not going to be fast. Sure, you could take any 80s economy car and make it fast, but it's not going to be when you just grab it like this. So performance-wise, that thing sits actually just above the WhyBeAre, believe it or not. I figured since it was older, it wouldn't be that fast, but older also got lightweight on its side. I'm sure it's a lot lighter than the WhyBeAre was. Now, we have a lot of alternative versions for the Corvette we can try. We have the beater, and then we also have the skid plate, and then maybe the guinea hatch, except that one doesn't have an engine. So that's going to take literally forever to make it through the quarter mile. So we'll start with the beater. And by the way, if you don't know how to spell beater, it's the emoji B-E-T-E-R. No, wait, that's not how you spell it. I've never been good at spelling. The funny thing is, look at this thing. Yeah, imagine driving behind this dude. You can't see nothing when you're driving behind him. So this one's obviously going to be quite a bit slow. It's going to go, is it going to reach under 20? Just barely, with a 19.694. That's pathetic. That's what happens when you have a blown engine, I guess. Now, here's quite possibly the slowest one we're going to test. This is the skid plate. And skid plate racing is a real thing where you get the rear wheels and you replace them with skid plates like this one has. So this time is going to be terrible, and also if you try to race this at a drag strip, they would kick you off of the strip because you're going to ruin the tarmac. But somehow I snuck on with this abomination, and we are going to make this quarter mile time no matter how much damage it does. And it would do a lot of damage all over the place. You can tell I really don't have that much control over this thing. It's kind of like swerving left to right. The transmission doesn't know what gear to be in. It's just a huge disaster of a vehicle. It really makes you wonder, can something be slower than this? 32.203. I will honestly be surprised if a vehicle even comes close to that time. That was terrible. And it had a lot of room for inconsistency. I was all over the place, but you kind of got to be when you're driving that thing. All right, next up, let's go to the old Pessima. And since it's old, that means we're going to want the automatic transmission on the 1.8 DX. And on this one, there's another version we're going to probably test as well. That's the 1.8 HX. So on the HX, it's the high efficiency version. So on that one, it has longer gearing, and then it has aerodynamic changes that make the vehicle more aerodynamic just to make it have better fuel economy. And I don't know if that's going to make it faster or slower in the end, so that's why we're going to test both of them. So with this one, we got a 17.960. And then for comparison purposes, let's grab the HX version, and then we'll actually see how it stacks up with the other vehicles, because first we need to figure out which of these is slower. And it really will be interesting to see which one ends up being faster, because this one has a manual transmission, which should be a bit faster on its own, except it also has really long gearing made for maximum fuel efficiency. So maybe it'll be slower because it's designed for fuel efficiency, or maybe just the fact that it has a manual gearbox will win out in the end. We're going to know in about 3 seconds or less. So 17.237. That is a lot faster than the other one, actually. That's almost a whole second faster. Unbelievably, it's even faster than the modern Pessima as well. And don't worry about how messy this is. We'll be going over all the results later on, but right now we're just compiling results and figuring all this out. So next up, how about we go with the ETK I series, which has a lot of options. This one has the most options out of any vehicle, it seems like. So we really got to break this down. First, we have 4 of the 2400s. Now, these two on the right are the facelifted version. The facelifted version has more power than the old version, so those ones are out. So all 6 of these are gone. So now we look at just these ones. Then we have the 2400i, which is a more fancy model that weighs only a little bit more. It weighs about 10 pounds more. But then we have the 2400iX, which weighs like 200 pounds more because it adds all-wheel drive. That one is probably going to be the slowest. And again, this is an older vehicle, so we're going to use the automatic version. All right, this will probably be the last vehicle we test in this video, because this is going to be a 2-part video, because I was doing some little calculations in my head and I realized something. Every vehicle we test is taking longer than the previous one because it's slower. And if I was to test every single vehicle in one video, it would be over 40 minutes. And I always try to make sure videos are never that long, because nobody wants to watch a video that long. 2 20-minute videos though, everybody loves that. So that's the goal that we're going to try to approach by splitting it into 2. Plus, I feel like we're at a really nice stopping point with the I-Series, because all the things that are left are either old cars or big chunky things. So the vehicles we have left are the Barstow, Blue Buck, Legrand, which seems like it might fit here, but I have a feeling the Legrand is going to be really slow. The Miramar, the Pickle, the Pigeon. Okay, he's just going to be slow because he's a 3-wheeler. And then we got the D series, the Burnside, the DT40L, H series, Hopper, Roamer, and T series. See, those are all cars that are not going to be fast. I know it. So I feel like this is a good stopping point where we say we did the fast half of the vehicles, and next time we'll do the slow half. So until next time, this is WhyBeAre, and remember, if you like or dislike this video, I'll know. I can tell by measuring the quarter-mile speeds. So do the right thing, and I'll see you next time.